Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming out. I know my announcement was kind of last minute, so it's great to see you all. I'm here with Charles Fleming, editor of Passengers Journal, and we'll be joined very soon by another editor, Anna Winham. And Charles is joining us from his car, which shows his level of dedication to the cause. So thanks, Charles. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks, Becky. I love this series that you do, and I just appreciate the newsletter so much. It's so great to have sort of like an insider, lit mag thing happening, and I just appreciate that. I read it all the time, so it's great.
Oh,
thanks for that.
And
that's great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. My pleasure. So tell us about the journal. Have you been with it from the very beginning, and what in God's name compelled you to want to start a literary magazine?
Sure. Oh, geez. So the journal was started, I think, in 2020 by two friends, one of which is not me. I think it was kind of started as like a kind of COVID passion project. A lot of lit journals, I think, were founded like around that time because people had extra time and were stuck inside and needed, creative outlets, so to speak. I came on the journal, I guess, a couple years ago, I think around February or March. One of my friends who has since graduated but was in my MFA program was trying to start like an audio recording kind of thing for the journal. Since it's a digital journal, we don't do print. And he just said, "Oh, you have a distinctive voice. You want to try reading some stuff?" And I said, "Sure, like why not?" He quickly became very busy and sort of handed off that department to me, this kind of audio thing. And then that became sort of my thing for the first year or so. And then just recently we've gotten a new audio editor, and so I kind of got promoted, I guess, if you can get promoted for at a job that pays you nothing, to assistant editor in chief. But that was after like about a year of kind of running and kind of establishing the audio department. So I came on, I guess, maybe about a year after it was founded, and I've been here, I guess, about 2 years. We're in our third year now. So yeah,
that's really
kind of the story.
Yeah. So the audio department, tell us, there's like an audio component where people read their submissions out loud? How does that work?
So we do it like a little bit differently at Passengers. We really don't view being a digital journal like as any kind of hindrance. And we really look for ways to use our digitalness sort of to further the mission of the journal. And one of our big missions is just, accessibility of stories and of literature in general. So we have a fully staffed audio department that is made up of lots of professional voice actors who actually read pieces on behalf of authors. Sometimes authors do read their own pieces. In our most recent issue on December 1st, we did have a author read his own piece, which is always fun when that happens. But typically we handle all of that in-house, and we master all those recordings. Our goal is to have everything be audiobook quality. All of our issues are fully listenable from start to finish, which are available on the website, but also on our podcast feed. If you do podcasts, you can get that there. Our last issue was 5.5 hours of audio content, so we produce pretty much an audio book every quarter. So we're really, really proud of that. I'm particularly proud of that because it was my baby for a while. But yeah, our current audio editor, John Brady, has been a lifelong actor. He's currently on tour with The Lion King, and he's been a great resource for us. He's brought in so many like amazing voice talents from that production who have helped us out and voiced some incredible stuff. It's something that I'm really proud of because so many people that we publish have never had their stuff read by professional voice actors. It's a real treat, I think, for most people.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've never had that experience. I think that'd be really cool.
Submit, Becky, submit.
So I should say also, I forgot to say at the beginning, as always, if any of you guys have any questions, just go ahead and type them into the chat and I'll work them into the conversation. So back to this audio thing, it's so interesting. So if I get a story published in the magazine, how does that then work? So then you will pair up a reader, a professional actor with the story. And then will I get a chance to listen and like make sure it's okay? Yeah, tell us.
Yeah, typically that's sort of how the process works. What pretty much happens is that I take all of our accepted subs and I load them up in a huge Google Doc that sometimes takes quite a while to load. By the time the issue's almost ready to come out, they can get to 60 or 70 pages or so. And then I release that Google Doc to all of our voice talents, and they pick the pieces that they would like to do. I'm a teacher by training. My undergrad degree is in teaching, and one of the things you learn very early on is that people tend to do a better job at things they like or things that they're passionate about, right? So the idea is, rather than sort of pairing pieces with people, I let people pair themselves, which I think just produces, much better content overall, because they're going to pick stuff they have a personal connection to for some reason. Typically that works out pretty well. It's rare that we have to go to a voice talent and sort of ask for something to happen. There are special occasions where a piece might require some special linguistic skill, for instance, dialect, et cetera, where there is sort of more care taken in how we pair those things. But generally speaking, people pick what they want to voice, and kind of pick how much, based on how much time they might have during that issue cycle or whatever. So that's kind of how that works. And generally that works pretty well for us. And then, there is typically some kind of communication between the voice person and the author. That kind of depends on which talent is doing which piece. But generally speaking, we really like for authors to approve of their recordings before we publish them.
So this is so interesting. And I think partly what makes it so interesting is that I had no idea that you do this, and it is really low key on the site. I don't even think that it's mentioned if you go to the site.
On the homepage, I don't believe that it is, but pretty much any of our issues, if you click on the issue, one of the first things that you'll see is the cover image, and then right beneath that is our audio issue.
I see.
For that issue. Right. And then each piece within the issue also has its own individual audio file attached, in case you don't want to listen to 5.5 hours or don't have that much time or whatever.
Okay, got it. Yeah, so it's not, you kind of have to dig. Once you get to the issue, you'll see it, but it's not clear in the submissions. Yeah, okay, interesting.
Right.
Okay, great. So we have a question here. When selecting work, do you consider how pieces will sound out loud, since it's such a big part of the journal?
It's a great question.
And the second part of this question is, how long do responses typically take?
So I'll answer that first one quickly, because we're extremely proud that we get almost all of our submissions are responded to within about 30 days. That's our standard. We get quite a lot of submissions, as most lit journals do. But we have passengers. I mean, the whole staff is about 50 people. Our prose and poetry departments are made up of roughly 10-ish readers and editors each. And we have a commitment to make sure that we get more than one set of eyes on every submission that comes in. But we're very proud that pretty much all of our submissions are returned with a yes or no within 30 days. If you ask for editorial feedback, it's about 60 days. But we do offer that as well. And to the first question, that's a really interesting question that we've had a lot of fun playing with, for instance. So I ask for our prose and poetry editors to not be concerned about audio stuff. I want them to take the best work first, the work that they think is most pertaining to our mission, so to speak. And then I ask for the audio department to have people on staff who can handle whatever we get. For instance, we've had a lot of really interesting kind of experimental pieces come in, right? How do you record a poem that features moments of erasure? That's been a fun one. We had one of those last issue. There's a lot of
Sorry, can I add?
That's a good question. That one I actually did myself, and essentially what I did was just record the full poem, and then I just cut snippets out, so it sounds sort of like a record skipping when you listen to it. But the point is, how do we kind of mirror that form in some kind of audio form? And I don't think it's always possible, but we try to be innovative and kind of interesting when we can be. And of course, the author, should approve that. I think Anna has joined us, by the way, which is great. But that's the general answer to that. I don't want the other departments to be concerned about audio per se. I want audio to be able to be creative with what the other departments choose. We I kind of like things to be kind of autonomous in that way, I think.
Sure. Hi, Anna. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Are you a specific department editor, fiction, poetry, nonfiction?
I'm the editor-in-chief of the journal.
Oh, got it.
So Anna's my boss.
Okay.
Charles is fast becoming my boss.
This is a question either of you can field with. That's a really huge staff, 50 people. So can you take us through start to finish what happens when a submission comes in? How do you decide on each work? I saw on your website that everything is read by everyone on the staff. So what happens in that process?
So, I mean, say we have a poem come in, every poem is read by the whole poetry reading team that we have on for that month. And we've done a few different arrangements between poetry and prose about like having a reading month versus an editing month and kind of actually rotating through the stuff. But everyone who's reading that month reads the poem. We have a voting system from -2 all the way up to 2, so that you can say kind of like how enthusiastic or how unenthusiastic you are about it. And we also encourage everyone to kind of comment back and forth and submittable. Then the editor and the assistant editors of that specific department will select the kind of the highest ranked pieces, or any that were particularly controversial that had people who like really loved them or really didn't love them, and have a discussion with those kind of like that smaller group of poems with the whole department to vote on which ones will finally make it into the journal. And that involves people being able to make the case for why they love a particular piece, even if it wasn't originally one that was voted on as highly by everyone. People can make the case for it. And we do occasionally solicit submissions from authors whose work we love, either people who we might know or people who we don't know at all, but we just love their work. We'll reach out to them and ask if they'd like to contribute something.
And so you mentioned the word controversial, and I know that's something you look for in your submissions, work that's risky, work, I think it says in the mission, work that's too controversial for other markets. So can you talk a little bit more, in what sense, what kind of controversy? What things are like good controversial, and what things are like, well, that's not the kind of controversial we're looking for?
So we're always coming at everything almost like from a subaltern positionality, where we're looking for pieces that have not had the opportunity to be read or spoken, not because they are like offensive, but because they're by people who have been in a position that's been like historically marginalized, or like I guess I want to make sure that we're saying we don't want to publish anything that is racist or sexist or homophobic. Like that's not the kind of controversy that we're trying to stoke. We're always coming at it from like a position of resisting authority, resisting oppression, saying things that the dominant literary establishment, which itself is a system of power, might not accept, might be offended by, but not something that is racist or sexist or etc.
Sure. So when the magazine, Anna, were you around for the creation of the magazine at the beginning?
No, I had a piece published in the 3rd issue. Okay. I read the first one and basically fell in love with it, but I didn't establish it. Yeah.
I don't know if either of you can speak to this, but I'm curious if you, when the magazine was first created, if you sensed a gap in the literary world, that things weren't speaking to that, the authority of the literary institutions. Did you feel like, there needs to be something out there that addresses these issues?
So I think so Zach Furlow and Aaron Wallace founded the journal, and I think that they felt that sometimes stories that are born out of trauma, particularly like war stories. The first issue had a lot of pieces from veterans. They're a little bit taboo in the literary world, just because many people who are writing are coming from a position of relative privilege in that way. Like that's the kind of experience or a set of experiences that is underrepresented in the literary world. And it's also, I mean, it's uncomfortable, it's messy. An American war veteran is in his or her own position of like relative global power, but also, within the US, it's complicated and it's messy, it's worthy of exploration, but for the most part is not written about and not talked about. So I think that was kind of the original gap, but it kind of bred this dark aesthetic and this willingness to engage with trauma that even though the trauma plot has become kind of a dominant feature of publishing, I think other work that is kind of born out of a moment of trauma but isn't necessarily about the trauma itself has been a little bit overlooked.
Sure. And go ahead, Charles.
Sorry, Becky. Just to kind of speak briefly, kind of like what Anna was saying, I think for us, like the part of our mission statement that really speaks to me, and I think speaks to a lot of our staff, is that we're looking for this stuff. We're looking for stuff that's necessary rather than desired, is something that we really think about a lot, right? And for me, like that's really the key to the whole thing, is kind of that second part, that's rather than desired, right? Like we're trying to find stuff that kind of looks under the rug of the human experience, like all the stuff that's kind of stuffed down there that we don't talk about, that includes trauma and other stuff too. And we want to bring that stuff, you know, to light. You know, there are certain kinds of traumas and kind of lived experiences that are, you know, acceptable, and certain kinds that kind of aren't. And we're really trying, I think, to complicate that in lots of ways. Sorry, Becky, go ahead, please.
I forgot, but that's fine. We have a question here. Being a USAF veteran prose writer who loves poetry but is totally intimidated with writing it, which we were actually just talking about before I hit record. I'm especially interested in your process for short fiction, flash, short story, novella, and full-length manuscripts. What are you looking for in prose? Do you guide submissions with requests for certain themes for a given publication? And do you accept excerpts from full-length manuscripts? So those are sort of three questions. What are you looking for in prose? And do you do theme issues? And do you accept excerpts from longer work?
We're looking for, I would say, pretty much the same thing in prose as in poetry. I was originally the prose editor, and I think what I was looking for at that time was always just a piece that like grabbed me, immersed me, and that I felt was necessary to publish, like something that I read that I thought this story needs to be in the world, and I'm not sure who else is going to put it in the world. So that is one thing that I would say look out for. In terms of full-length manuscripts, we have Passengers Journal, which we publish quarterly online, and then we do also have a Passengers Press, which publishes full-length manuscripts. We, like Charles and I, don't work on that side of it as much, but I would say we're still looking for pretty much the same thing. And we do have prose editors on the press side, who could probably, if you email them, just they would say what they're looking for. And we have had a couple of theme issues in the past. We did a Pride issue. We recently did an ekphrastic poetry contest. We'll occasionally do something like that. For the most part, though, we're just trying to publish the best pieces that we come across in each quarterly issue. And we would accept excerpts. They would have to be able to stand alone. Like they would just have to make sense if someone was reading them with no context. Charles, do you have anything to add on what we're looking for in prose?
Yeah, I mean, nothing that I think we kind of haven't said before. I mean, we really want our issues to be, slaps in the face. I mean, that's how kind of like Anna has described it. And I'm stealing from her, kind of plagiarizing her description there. But I mean, we want the stuff that we publish to be harrowing in some way. I mean, like we're looking to shake people and to be shaken, and that's a complicated thing right now with lots of like discussions around trauma porn, as it's being called, or spectacle, like I think is kind of like the academic term, I guess. And that gets pretty complicated. So I can't say that we're going to publish anything and everything that's harrowing or that slaps us in the face. There has to be some sort of skill and measure there that's that is applied to some extent.
They said that they are very proud of it. Yeah, I'm not on camera and I'm on mute.
But yeah, that's we're looking for stuff that shakes us in a really artistic and hopefully innovative way.
I think it's almost in the Heideggerian sense where we want to give people like a sense of anxiety that rips them out of the normal mode of being for a moment to give you a reflection on your life.
And you mentioned innovative, Charles. I'm curious, are you looking for work that is also stylistically innovative? Because sometimes those things don't always go together. It sounds like you're looking for work that really hits you viscerally and gets under the skin. And sometimes, in my opinion, at least more formal experimentation, it's risky in language, it's risky in style, but it doesn't always have that kind of, slap you in the face effect. It can, but not always. So I'm curious, are you looking more for traditional stories that pull you into like a wrenching situation with a really strong character, or are you looking for more risk in terms of style, or both?
I think both. I think, and I kind of love to hear Anna's thoughts on this kind of in more depth. But I mean, our prose and poetry teams are very sort of agile at the kind of stuff that they read and that they are willing to take risks on. They also frequently, at least every issue has, I'd say maybe like an average of 2 or 3 pieces from each department that have gone through some sort of like revision process with our editors. We actively look for things that are taking risks and maybe say, let's amp up some of this risk, or let's dial it back a little bit. Sometimes, the content of a piece is really working and the form isn't quite working. Sometimes the form's distracting or whatever. But we're really kind of, I think, looking for both. And I'd love to hear kind of what Anna has to say in more depth on that. But we're actively, we're looking for risk and kind of innovation formally and in terms of content, I think, and in terms of theme.
Yeah, I was going to say either.
Yeah.
Either or both. I mean, I do think that sometimes the more formally risky something is, sometimes the less risky it is in content. Sometimes if something is more formally experimental, it's harder to get immersed in the story of it. But I'm thinking of a couple of pieces that we published. One with this just like really fantastic, strange language that's really hard to read through, Julian Mithra's piece that we published a while ago. Super experimental, but the story is also really immersive. So I feel like it's almost like whatever is striking and unsettling, I feel like is what we're looking for. And however it gets the job done, as long as it's good, that's what we want.
Yeah, that's great. And another follow-up question, are there any prose genres you do not accept, such as horror?
We would accept any genre. I would say we don't go for like gratuitous violence or something like that. And I would say that we're mindful of things like, if there is like body horror or something, like whose body is it, what and who is enacting violence on it. But we're not closed to any genre.
So can we talk more about risk? Because I think it's a really interesting topic that sort of gets thrown around a lot. Like you hear it in workshop, like you need to risk more, or you hear editors say, I love writing that takes risks. And I think, like, for me personally, I don't always know what that means. Like, what is it? Are you wanting to see the writer themselves take a risk, like put more of themselves on the page emotionally? Do you want to see some kind of departure in the story? Like, whoa, I did not see the story going in that direction. The writer really took a risk because they could have lost me at that point, but they went in this completely unexpected place. Like, what does it mean? You guys seem like the people to ask. I'm just really curious for very like selfish craft reasons. I want to know like what people think about and what they're saying when they talk about this idea of taking a risk. Does it mean saying something taboo, writing in a way that could potentially alienate someone? What is it? What does it mean to you guys?
I feel like for me, I would almost rephrase it as I want writing that's like high stakes. And I guess what that means is also like I want it to matter. And that means I want the author to care about it. I want the readers to care about it, and I want to care about it. Um, I want it to be something that if we publish it, I feel that it had to be said, it was necessary or something like that. And that whoever reads it will be changed by having read it.
And by high stakes, you mean like high societal stakes, maybe, because you don't mean like Gone Girl, right? Like a high
No.
stake, you know, like, because that book,
But I mean, Gone Girl is great, and I wish
it's great, it's fun, right? But it's not necessarily what we mean in this context, right? It's like high, so another kind of stakes, maybe.
it's almost like I want it to be consequential.
Yeah.
I want there to be like change in the world by having read it.
Right.
That's I think what I think of. I don't know what Charles thinks of.
Yeah, and I mean, very similar. I mean, like I think about emotional risk and vulnerability, more so than, oh, I'm going to say something that is, offensive in some kind of like artistic way. I think about whether, like in workshop, Becky, like you mentioned, people talk about, whether a piece is, effective, right? Effective. Does it effectively do what it's supposed to do? But I'm really drawn to writing, and I think Passengers is drawn to writing that is affective, right? That affects a reader in some way, be that, bodily or whatever. I mean, I wouldn't recommend that anyone maybe read one of our whole issues in one sitting. It's probably not gonna, you might need to take a break, like go outside for a walk for a minute, like that's okay. But I think that there's a sort of healthy unsettling that we're looking for from pieces, and in our own kind of like responses to the pieces that we publish, a kind of healthy disturbance of daily rhythms and daily life, when you allow yourself to be affected by someone else's human lived experience in some way that is told masterfully and really sort of enraptures you. I mean, so that's kind of what I think of as this difference between effect and affect, and how that plays into what we look for and what we put into the world.
Sure. That's great. So given your mission, are there a lot of similar types of submissions that you see, that maybe you could tell the writers here, people watching this, like if you are doing a certain thing, keep in mind, we see 100x type of submissions per month. So try to do it a little bit differently.
I think it comes in waves.
Yeah.
For a while we were getting a lot of dead animal poems.
Oh, really? Sorry, I should have laughed. It's just funny the things that editors get.
Yeah, that was a big trend towards the tail end of COVID lockdowns. For some reason, we had a ton, and we published quite a few actually, but we had submitted a ton of them. I came up with all sorts of like weird sociological theories for why that is, but that's neither here nor there. I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of hard to say if there are certain things that I would recommend people not do in their work without seeing it. I mean, I think almost anything can be done well, and can be done, artistically, intellectually, pleasing, sonically pleasing in poetry. And prose. I just am not, I don't know that we can really like put ourselves in positions of like arbiters of ways that people can do that or can't do that, I guess. I don't know. Anna, any other thoughts?
Just my only thought is that like the opening really matters.
Well, yeah.
Just I do think that people make decisions quickly as to whether they're going to want to keep reading, particularly with prose. And so I think almost like the biggest disqualifier is if the opening is weak. The rest of the story might be really good, but you lose people if the first paragraph doesn't win.
Sure. And maybe an easier question is, what do you want to see more of? So rather than, what should writers try to avoid doing, or because you're seeing a lot of it already, what is it that you're not seeing that you want to see more of? Maybe living animals.
I would love more creative nonfiction and essays.
A lot of editors see that. Yeah, it's interesting.
Some of the best pieces that we've published have been creative nonfiction or essays, and I just wish that we saw more of this.
Do you mean like personal essay, not reportage? Some magazines like kind of more outward looking repertorial pieces, some like more personal essay.
I think probably leaning more personal essay, but we did publish this one piece that was like a film review that was phenomenal. So I think once again, kind of, I know we keep saying the same thing, it's kind of annoying. We're open to anything as long as it's good. But yeah, probably leaning more personal.
Yeah.
I think also, just to add to that, we would love to see more submissions from more international writers and artists. I think being US based, and a huge amount of our audience is US based, we often sort of I think struggle to attract, for whatever reason, pieces from kind of more internationally based artists and authors. I mean, I think we would love to see more of that. We'd love to publish more of that.
That's great. So can you take us through a recent piece that you accepted, either fiction, poetry, nonfiction? Why? What was it? How did it hook you right from the very start? And what made you say yes?
That's a tough one. Anna, do you want to talk about Denny and Me?
That actually is the one I was thinking of.
Yeah, do that. We just published this piece that was, I guess more like an essay. I think it closed our most recent issue. Yeah, it closed our most recent issue, and whatever Anna picks to close and open the issue are usually very important as far as what we think is some of the best stuff that we have there. So Anna, please.
Yeah, I mean, so this was a pretty short, I don't know, maybe like 2,000 word essay, and in a sense, it was a little bit of a departure from a normal Passengers aesthetic. It wasn't super dark. It was almost so the story is about having queer
Go this way.
family.
Let's go this way. Let me think about this.
Yeah, it's about having queer family that you didn't necessarily know that you would have. And it was almost like an older queer non-binary family member talking to and about a younger queer non-binary family member. And that's definitely a topic I feel like that could get pretty heavy, just because of things like murder, homelessness, trans suicide rates, things like that. But actually the way that the story was told was pretty fairly light, given the potential heaviness. And it was written in this way that I thought would be accessible to someone who is very familiar with these topics, but also accessible to someone who had less familiarity. It really did a good job of kind of being able to be read by multiple perspectives. And it, even though it was fairly short, it managed to kind of fit in so many details that ended up recurring throughout the piece. It felt like it was meandering. It felt like I was on an emotional and thoughtful journey through this family with these people, all these kind of small details. And it ended positively, with hope and with a reinterpretation of the possible, or something like that. And I think that it really, I think it managed to grab everyone in the prose department, because it did have this kind of polysemy, ability to talk to different people simultaneously, which I just thought was so technically brilliant. And I thought the kind of care and consideration of the people and the topic was really outstanding.
Mm.
So, and so I think that it just from the beginning kind of hooked everyone in the department for kind of all different reasons. And it made me cry while I was reading it. Really, really spoke to me directly. And I don't know, in terms of, I mean, we did like a little bit. The author requested of us a few changes in the essay before publication, for respect of like actual people who were in the actual story, because it was nonfiction. And it is, I mean, it is about like the evolving nature of language to talk about people who we like haven't like had words for in our language previously, and so some of the language itself evolved, which was kind of cool in the process. And yeah, I don't know if you have anything more to say about that piece, Charles.
I think, yeah, I think what really impressed me about that piece is the way that the people are centered, right? The humans are the center of the piece. And that's something that when people talk about, you know, these issues around like trauma porn and spectacle, like and whatnot, like for me, that's kind of the only way to navigate that. When you have like a situation, when you have a story or a poem like in which you can choose to center the trauma, but you instead choose to center humanity and lived experience, and not only the trauma that's possible within these structures of power that we all live in. That to me is, you know, effective, right? When you resist the urge to make the spectacle the obvious choice, and you instead choose to make spectacle out of humanity and our shared lived experience, our emotional connections to each other, that to me is innovative in our current kind of system that we're working in right now, like in this lit world where we're navigating all this stuff, very heavy stuff, you know. But I think that's just a brilliant choice that this author Jay Brooke, you know, centers people, centers emotion, centers, you know, your family members, you know, your friends, you know, could be any of these people. That's what I thought was really brilliant and really touching about it, was the resistance to center the trauma, and instead the reliance upon, you know, lived human life, you know. Yeah.
I didn't realize the author is Jay Brooke. They actually left a comment on my site that working with you guys was a really great experience too.
Oh,
so
touching. Wonderful. Thank you for that.
All around.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean,
wonderful.
It's interesting. It sounds like what you're saying too is sort of that you want to see the writer reaching for the harder emotion, you know, which sort of underlies spectacle, right? There's something. Spectacle is sort of like the easy feeling, the most accessible thing that anybody, it's like a cheap feeling that you invoke in the reader because anybody could be shocked or, you know, have a kind of strong sentimental response. But what you're seeking is like a harder feeling, something a little more complicated and harder to access and messier. That's sort of what I'm picking up. Yeah, something a little bit.
Yeah. I think I would say, what's your first impression of the way you could tell that really painful story? Now, what's two levels deeper than that?
Right.
You know, what's under the surface of that first way, that initial way that you think you might write it? I don't know. Maybe. What's deeper? What's deeper than that?
Yeah. Interesting. So when you're accepting work, do you think about how the pieces speak to other pieces that you've already taken? So will you say, well, this piece kind of has a light feeling, let's go for something edgier? Or do you just take whatever you love?
I think the primary motivator is take what we love. But I think inevitably, especially if you're kind of in a meeting choosing pieces, there's some balancing acts that go on. I also, when selecting kind of the order of the pieces, try to, you know, we often end up with, you know, several pieces on the same theme. If that's, you know, like for example with the dead animal poems, we did publish a number of them. So kind of like trying to order them to speak to each other, and contrast each other, or sometimes depending on the topic, like spread it out across the issue.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think primarily taking what we love is the
Yeah. So we were discussing this a little bit before I hit record, but Charles and I was confessing to my feeling of being intimidated by poetry. And Charles was talking about his feeling of intimidation by fiction a little bit. So I'm curious, like as editors, how do you know what you like? How do you know, if you're, especially if you're dealing with stuff that is really emotionally complex, how do you know if it's working, or do you just trust your instinct?
Maybe I can talk about poetry a bit. Maybe Anna can talk about prose, I think, because she was prose editor for a while. I don't know, things that I love in poems that I love to see when we, of course, Anna and I are sort of outside of this apparatus that kind of makes these decisions. Like our poetry and prose departments are fairly like autonomous, and we really trust those editors and those assistant editors and those readers to usually make those decisions. We very rarely interject ourselves into those decision-making processes. But when they send their stuff that they've taken, I'm always super excited to look at it. And poetry in particular, I think we really favor strong line breaks. We really favor strong endings, I think, in poems, as Anna was talking about, openings in prose. I think that often we like poetry, and we tend to publish a lot of poetry that sort of forces you to take a breath as it ends, that forces you to kind of sit there and be sort of in it for a second before you can kind of move on. I don't know, I mean, I think that's kind of pretty common, I guess. But other than that, I mean, we've taken all sorts of interesting stuff. I guess it's kind of hard for me to be kind of more specific than that. I mean, that seems kind of mundane. Like, hey, yeah, everybody's looking for good line breaks. Everybody's looking for a strong ending, right? Like, who's looking for those poems with the weak endings? I don't know. But Anna, go ahead, please.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think this is actually for all departments, and we publish visual art also. I think I just acknowledge that we as individuals have a particular taste, and I'm not trying to edit any of my editor's taste out. Like, I was initially attracted to the journal because of its aesthetic and its politics. And like that's my aesthetic jived with that aesthetic, and that's, I think, we're still going for that aesthetic. And instead of trying to say something like, oh, we're trying to like remove our bias, it's almost like we're leaning into it. Like this is our taste. I like other stuff too, but there are journals that publish other kinds of things. And when that's what I want to read, like I'll go and read a different journal. So I think like Charles said, it's true that the poetry department, the prose department, and the visual art department, they're all pretty autonomous. But we told all of the editors of those different departments, your taste is the guiding force. And how you edit is going to be different than how any other editor would edit. So we actually just promoted a new prose editor for this past issue, and it was his first one. And you can already see like a change in editorial direction from our previous prose editor. I think there's a lot more focus now on characterization and like long form storytelling, whereas our previous editor was really partial to almost like rural queer stories. Not that that is all that we publish, but you could tell there was a partiality towards those. But I think like that's fine. It's kind of cool to say, oh well, I like that person's taste, and so I'm going to read the stories that I want to publish. And so it's not that I think that our opinions are the sole good ones. But if you learn the aesthetic or you learn the taste, it's almost like if you're in the mood for some harrowing poetry, go and check out Poetry as edited by Andrea Chaplinsky, our poetry editor.
Yeah. just to add to that kind of
sorry.
briefly, I think that our mission statement, necessary rather than desired, is great because everybody has their own interpretation of what that is
Mhm.
and kind of what that looks like. And that, as kind of our guiding mission statement, that allows these different editors, like I want to know what your like interpretation of that is. And I want to be able to see what your interpretation of that is, in these issues. We actively push them to, just like Anna said, to lean into their taste, to lean into their version of what necessary rather than desired means and looks like. Sorry, Becky, go ahead.
So I was just going to ask, should writers continue to submit to you if they get a rejection letter? And it also, it sounds like you have a sort of rotating cast of editors for different issues, so they might not even know if somebody continues to submit. But what is the proper course of action? Somebody sends work to you, they get a form rejection letter. What should that writer, should they immediately send you new stuff? Should they wait 6 months? Should they not send new work?
They should send you work. If they think it's a good fit for passages. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so many times we have to reject a story, not because it's bad, but just because it doesn't fit this issue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And do you send personalized rejections or not so much?
Yeah, I mean, we have almost like tiered rejections. I will say most rejections we have to just send a form rejection because we are an all volunteer staff.
Mm-hmm.
It's just too much to ask of our editors to personalize everyone. But the ones that come really close, the ones that we are so close to accepting but can't, we'll send a personalized rejection, either asking them to resubmit this story or to send something slightly different. Yeah, we do something.
So this is a question that I ask all the editors, which is just what keeps you doing this? Charles, I know you're in school right now, and I'm sure you have things going on. You have a life beyond literary. And I think you're both volunteers. I'm not sure if that's correct. Yeah. So what keeps you, surely there must be times where you feel like you just don't have time, you don't have energy to read the submissions, to go through it all. What keeps you in the work?
I think I'll take this one first because I actually do have to head to class after this. Becky, thanks so much for the time. I really appreciate it. I was unaware. I thought classes ended on Friday when we scheduled this. So,
okay.
But we have one more day of classes, and I have to get to one. But no, what keeps me doing it? Passengers, like many lit journals, is a wonderful community of friends and like-minded people. I get excited whenever we're having like editors meetings, which is totally weird. Right? Like, none of us get paid from this. Like, none of us do this for any other reason other than that we love it. And I continue to stay involved because I love the people that have the same passion that I do to try to get this stuff out there, to tell stories that need to be told, and to put those stories out there in the world. I just think it's a mission that continues to be one of the brightest and most gratifying things in my life. And part of the reason I think why is because it's not connected to any capitalist, I don't do this for the money. Like, I do it because I love it, and everybody does it because they love it. And there's something sacred about doing it for no money, I think. And not that I wouldn't love to make some money. If we ever happen to get any kind of funding of some sort, we're trying to apply for grants and stuff. But no, it's the community of people that have built up around this thing that are just as passionate about the project and the mission as I am, and as Anna is, I think. But on that, I'll pass to Anna. And Becky, thanks so much. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Go get to class.
Right.
Thanks, Charles.
Got to. All right. Bye-bye.
Take care.
For my part, I think it's whenever I hear from someone who's kind of in my life, but I haven't spoken to them recently, and they tell me that they've read Passengers, and it surprises me, and something about it has moved them, or they want to write something, they want to submit something, or just kind of hearing about people who I didn't expect to have moved, because I've moved every issue, that's a given. I know I'm going to read the pieces and feel my feelings, and I know that the authors are going to, and I know that our staff is going to, but whenever there's someone who surprises me, that's the thing that makes me want to keep doing it.
That's great. And is there a way for people to get involved? Do you ever need volunteer readers?
We always do. We have a Google form that I could put in the chat that is an application. Either we're always particularly looking for voice talent to help us record all of the pieces. I'm sure that Charles mentioned that every issue is fully voiced, which has been like a huge but also really rewarding undertaking. But we are always looking for a more diverse cast of voices than we have, just because the stories that we publish are usually from a broad set of people.
Okay. And one final question, are you open for submissions now?
We are.
Are you open year round, or is there a cutoff?
We close, so we have 4 issues each year, and we're open pretty much like 3 months for each of them. But at the end of each month, we close for a few days just to give our readers a chance to catch up.
Okay.
So I'd say
Great.
Default open.
So everybody get on it, go submit. And thank you so much, Anna, for taking the time to tell us about your magazine. Thank you everyone for coming out today.
And thank you for having me and Charles. It was really good.
It was really fun. Thanks. Thanks, guys.